Hey, how's it going, everybody? Shaun here for another edition of Shaun Solo, and today I want to talk about a little game called The Vanishing of Ethan Carter. Yeah, it was released last year, actually, but I just got around, I bought it like when it first came out, but I just recently got around to actually playing the whole game. I started it up, I was like, oh, this is really interesting, it's cool, and for one reason or another, it just kind of got pushed to the back, and I never got around to it until recently. And what made me want to make this video beyond just playing it is actually coming out for the PlayStation 4 on July 14th, so it's going to open it up to a whole new audience. And like spoilers, I like this game. I think it's interesting. It's got problems. It's not perfect, but we'll get into that, right? It's developed by the Astronauts, which is a Polish studio. And if you don't know who the Astronauts are, they are kind of made up of people from another Polish studio called People Can Fly. And People Can Fly made a game that came out in 2011 called Bulletstorm. A really kind of underrated, silly first-person sci-fi shooter. It's kind of, whenever I tell people about it, Bulletstorm, because I do recommend it to people, like I'm doing right now, I always kind of compare it to, or make the analogy that this is the game that you wish Duke Nukem Forever was. Because it kind of has the same kind of spirit and dripping with cartoon machismo, and it's really silly and a lot of fun. And honestly, if you haven't ever played it before, it's totally worth picking up. And usually through like on sale or something through Steam or whatever, you can get it really cheap. I've seen it, I think, as low as like $4 or $5. But anyways, on to the topic at hand. The Vanishing of Ethan Carter. It's a first-person atmospheric kind of horror mystery game. And you play as a psychic detective, Paul Prospero, and you've gotten a mysterious letter from some boy with the name Ethan Carter, and so you head to his neck of the woods, no pun intended, to go kind of solve the mystery and see what's going on with Ethan. And it's an interesting game. It's very interesting, incredibly beautiful. The graphics on this game are kind of astounding. Even kind of you get taken aback a little bit. Some of the photorealism. It's something that we're kind of seeing a lot more of lately with things like, PT or the upcoming Allison Road, like that attention to detail. What makes this even more impressive, these are outside environments. It's not kind of relegated to like a house or a room or a hallway like those games are. Because that's kind of what allows those games to look as good as they do, is that there's an intense amount of focus on very small areas. So the minutia is, really, really closely examined and done well. But The Vanishing of Ethan Carter does it in kind of an open world. And it is a beautiful open world, kind of invokes kind of a Seattle vibe, if I'm not mistaken. Or Oregon. It's Oregon. I think it's Oregon. I might be wrong on that. Seattle, Oregon, kind of in the forest of those kind of areas. And it's a very compelling game. It's got a lot of interesting mechanics. Basically what you do is you kind of in a non-linear fashion, any way you really want to. The world is kind of open to you. And it does a good job of kind of hiding the barriers in terms of like where you can and cannot go. But for the most part, you feel like there's a sense of freedom, and everything feels like connected. Especially once you get further into the game, you realize like how connected this whole area is through like roads and pathways and following train tracks and whatnot. Some of the main mechanics of the game, I would say the main mechanic, because they use it for sometimes and sometimes they don't, which is this thing where you kind of recreate events or the circumstances surrounding events in terms of like moving things back into place where they were, and through your psychic powers you're able to kind of uncover and watch like a ghost image of what happened, so you can kind of see where you should go next. I mean, beyond the fact that there's usually a path or like a direction that's kind of linear that'll tell you that. Just by like game design, kind of just tells you where to go, kind of. So that's kind of the main thing, and there's probably like I think there's 9 puzzles or puzzle equivalents. But the thing is, some of them are really easy to miss, because some of them are not predicated on that whole like putting things back. Some of them are more just like kind of story snippets. It kind of just gives a wider breadth to the narrative and like what's going on, and kind of clues you in a little bit. In all honesty, if you miss some stuff, you might have a better experience, because if you end up getting frustrated or go to a wiki or a walkthrough, you're going to kind of spoil some stuff, because missing some of the things and then maybe going back later and finding them might be preferable. Because once you get to the reveal at the end of the game, if you found everything up to that point, it's a little less impactful. And I think you just see it coming kind of from a mile away what the conclusion of the story is. That's one problem I had in terms of, like, if I thought about it as a whole, the whole narrative is that it kind of concludes in a very, I don't know, almost cliched way. Like, you really see it coming. Maybe not the specifics of the event, but like in terms of who you are and what the larger experiences that you have in the world, what they like, how they actually come to be, it's kind of obvious a little bit. But there's some really fun stuff in here. Some really like inventive, fun, creepy like atmosphere and interesting puzzles. Nothing is going to stump you too bad, save for maybe one. There's one where you have to go through, you're in kind of like these dilapidated buildings and you have to go through certain doorways in a correct like order, where there's kind of like a portal and you can kind of switch between like what you want to, room you want to walk into in certain doorways, and you have to like pick the correct ones, and the answer to the puzzle isn't immediately obvious, and you have to kind of go off the beaten path a little bit. You have to kind of go to another area to find the answers, and then with that in mind go back to that building. So there's a lot of stuff like that in the game where it kind of encourages you to explore your immediate surroundings, and it doesn't hold your hand, it doesn't clue you in, there's no objective markers, there's nothing, none of that kind of stuff. There isn't even like an inventory system, you're not like picking up stuff for the most part. And if you do pick up something in an area, you probably need to use it like in that area pretty close to wherever you found it. So it's kind of, I don't know, like, so the challenge isn't super like high level, right? It's definitely more focused on like creating a mood and a tone and kind of telling you a story. That's really what the game is more concerned with, rather than like having you rack your brain in kind of typical adventure game fashion, because you're not going to have a lot of stuff to experiment with. And the problem I would imagine that a lot of people might have, especially like the second, well, it's technically the second puzzle, but it's the first one a lot of people find, is has to do with like moving a rail car and like finding out how this guy got killed. Like, it's one of the first things that you're gonna come across after you cross this great big bridge. And I think the barrier is just people kind of just understanding the mechanics and the concept of what you're supposed to do, because that'll take some messing around with at first. And I imagine there's probably some people gonna be a little frustrated by that. But that's not something I feel is damning. Like, the game says right off the bat, like, we're not gonna hold your hand, we're not gonna tell you anything, this is completely on you. You figure it out. You're Paul Prospero, you figure it out. Just like Paul would have to, kind of, right? So I respect it, but I also understand maybe people getting stuck and not giving it like a fair shake after like the first hour or so. Because if you can't like get on board with like the mechanics of like the mystery solving aspect of it, or the recreation of events, then a lot of the other stuff's not going to make a lot of sense. And I think that it's potentially a problem. I didn't really have too much of a problem with it though. And I'm a person that I really love adventure games, but I'm not the best at them sometimes. Like, sometimes it does take me an extra step or two, maybe takes me a little bit longer to kind of get on the same wavelength as the game creators. Because I feel like a lot of adventure games, like solving puzzles, are kind of predicated on like kind of understanding where the game developer is coming from. So, and this game doesn't like hold your hand in a sense. Like, you know, there is no really like even like ramp up in difficulty. It's all kind of the same level and of challenge for the whole game. Like, it never gets harder or easier or anything. Like, you know, some things are obviously easier than others. Like some of the puzzles in quotes are just kind of like following like somebody through this forest. It's a really memorable moment where you were following an astronaut through this kind of wooded area until you get to the destination. I won't spoil it because it's actually pretty cool. It's one of my favorite parts of the game, save for the end of the puzzle of the cave maze. There's a maze with caves, and you have to get through it, and then you have to solve a puzzle based on like things you found in the maze. There's a lot of inventive stuff in here. I would just say it's a little inconsistent. Like thinking about it now in hindsight, kind of working through my feelings on camera, which maybe I should have done before, but whatever. So it's a really cool game. It's interesting. It's got a lot of interesting stuff going on. It's one of those things that makes me excited about what the astronauts will do next. Now, having said that, what they are doing next is actually kind of reconfiguring the Vanishing of Ethan Carter. So the PlayStation 4 edition, which will also be re-released on PC, is they kind of reworked the engine. I don't know like to what extent it's going to be different, but the main thing I know is they reworked the engine, and maybe, I don't know, maybe they added some stuff, maybe there'll be some bonuses or whatnot. Like, I'd be interested, especially just to play it on the PS4. Honestly, like when I played it a few weeks ago, right before they announced that it was coming to PS4, I had no idea. I had no clue that it was coming to PS4. And I probably would have waited, honestly. Especially if they're going to have like kind of a better version of the game. So if you haven't played it yet, you might want to just wait until July 14th. Kind of see what the word is on the new version. Maybe it'll be worth it for you. Maybe it's not. As of right now, though, if you were to get it, like say on a sale or something like that, some equivalent, or you have a gift card or whatever, if it was like $8, I would say it's completely worth it. It's 100% worth the money, just for an interesting experience if you're a fan of kind of narratively driven games and adventure games. It's kind of part of this burgeoning thing of like kind of recontextualizing what an adventure game can be, kind of moving away from the classic Scum Engine style games like the LucasArts games and the Tim Schafer stuff, and because there's a lot of that kind of stuff that comes out in the modern era, a lot of good ones too. You know, some of my favorite games over the past like 5 years have been like point and click adventure games, actually, come to think of it. There's a new one that came out that's actually really good, Techno Babylon, and before that there was games like Gemini Rue or Resonance. I've heard a lot of good things about the Blackwell series, which I have actually picked up recently on sale on goodoldgames.com because they're awesome. And I'm going to be checking that out in the near future. So my final word on this whole thing, I would recommend, like I said, I'd recommend it to adventure game fans and people that are fans of narratively driven games. Maybe it's a really beautiful game. It's a kind of just a pleasure to explore the environment and kind of check your expectations about that story. I would say, and don't use a guide, because technically you can skip like puzzles. A lot of them, I think. You could probably skip some. I didn't myself. I ended up finding all of them because I went back and looked afterwards. Looked at a walkthrough to see if I had gotten everything I could get out of the game because I was enjoying it. It's a pretty short experience. It's about maybe 4 hours or so, 4 to 5 hours. I'll say 4 to 6 hours actually. I'll say 4 to 6 hours just because of the obtuse nature of some of the puzzles, but it's worth sticking in there for, and I think you'll be pleasantly surprised if you haven't picked up this game already. Alright everybody, that's my thoughts on the Vanishing of Ethan Carter, and I'll talk to you guys next time I have something to talk about.